Welcome to the Sprint 87 review. My name is Sorota, and I get to be your MC today. Next slide, please.
1 second, I have to turn someone's video camera off. Okay.
So I will share an update on the Sprint statistics. John Price will update us on the community happenings. Dan Clarizio will speak to the UI, and myself and Adam to the providers. Tina will update us on Automate, Joe Rafaniello on Platform, Alberto on REST API, and Chris on Documentation. So 341 pull requests were merged this sprint across all 92 repos. Over a quarter of those were merged in the classic UI repo, almost 20% in the ManageIQ core repo, and almost 19% on integration tests. Not unlike last sprint. Next slide, please. This was a very strong sprint in terms of the number of merged pull requests. What's that? 67 more than last sprint. And I think this is a reflection of where we are in the development phase of the Hammer release. We're trying to get as many pull requests merged as rapidly as possible. Next slide, please. Large number of enhancements, over 40%. And this, again, is not a surprise. We're trying to get as many features implemented and merged before the feature freeze for the Hammer release. And then almost 27% were bug fixes. Next slide, please. Health report. A few dips here and there. Of note is that the ManageIQ content repo is a little smellier. Not sure why.
I talked to Greg McCullough, and he said it's because of the V2V kind of transition of just getting things done for that.
It's mid-development, yeah? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Google Provider, 10% increase in test coverage, which is great. And Tom Sufal will dig into that a little bit when he shares an update on the Google Provider. Next slide, please. Over to John.
Okay, so the last month in ManageIQ blog entries were done by our very own Drew. She has written, the first one was 2 Mac minutes or McDonald minutes. And the other one is YAML-MIQ, something like that. And Drew's actually offered to write the next couple of ones as well. The Gapper Industriali 3 release was done on May 15th. And there's also 2 upcoming events that if anyone would like to participate, you can follow those links and speak to Carol, and she'll get you all set up. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Hi, everybody. For the UI, you can see there 96 PRs were merged. This is across SUI, V2V, UI components, and of course the main UI repo. You can see also that most of those were enhancements following along with the work on Hammer. Of course, still pretty many bugs were fixed for prior releases as well. In the enhancements area, let's see, so we added the reconfigure for VMware cloud providers, added an endpoint URL field for the AWS endpoints, which I think will be shown in the provider slides. We added live search to a couple of drop-downs where needed. One was in the chargeback area and also in the report editor available fields, a long asked for enhancement. Another great enhancement was the ability to set the advanced config settings at the region and zone levels. You can still set them at the server levels. What this allows settings to do is trickle down to the server from above, but you can still override them at lower levels. So that's really cool. Also added network adapter reconfig for the vCloud providers. We're now displaying the port groups for VMs and instances. Network manager, you can now chase through the cloud tenants and to their lists. Added the virtual network cards to the VM summaries for VMware. And then in V2V, they added the associated plans attribute, gives you a little bit more information, and you can also delete transformation mappings now. So next slide. So I'll show some of these enhancements. The live search and report editor, this is before the change. You can see there that top box is the available fields. It was a big list box, and you had to scroll through it and try to select the ones that you wanted. And it could get really long. I mean, this one's actually just showing container performance, but if you pulled up like VMs or instances, that box would have, I don't know, probably thousands of lines in it. So next slide. So we replace that with the Bootstrap drop-down control component there, and that's the available fields. You can see now it's like a drop-down. So when you pop that open, next slide, you now have the live search capabilities. You can type in there. You can do multi-select and pick different things. So you can actually change your search while you're picking things. So you can pick a few, change your search, pick some other things, and then still move them down to the other box. So definitely more usable and a lot easier to find things. Next slide. Port groups were added into the Ethernet adapters for VMs and instances. Hard to see there, but if you zoom in later, you can see it when you get the deck. Next slide. There's the advanced configuration settings. So now you have an advanced tab on both the region and zone level, as well as server. So like I said, you can make settings trickle down, set them globally up on top or by zone or individually by server. Next slide. Cloud tenants link on the network manager summary. So similar to everything else, but now you can get to the cloud tenants and pop open a list of them. In other words, drill down in there. Next slide. So V2V there on the bottom right, you can see the associated plans now that are attached to the infrastructure mapping. And the next slide. You can also delete transformation mapping. So the top one shows, confirmation that you want to delete it. The bottom one shows that, hey, this is still being used, all right, by certain plans. So are you sure you want to delete these? Because you might break one. And next slide. Some bugs that were fixed. The parent cloud provider links in some of the textual summaries were broken. Another one of these where you were actually on Ansible playbooks, but if you navigated it through the repository summary page, you would get the incorrect tag page. You'd be setting tags for a different object. After filtering, the services weren't being displayed correctly, so we fixed that. And on the retirement form, the time was not being displayed properly in the local time. And that is it for the UI. I think Bronagh's next on providers.
Yep. So today we'll share an update on all three public cloud providers. That's Amazon, Azure, and Google. And also on the on-premise providers, so VMware, OpenStack, and Rev. Next slide, please. So VMware and Overt jointly had most merge pull requests with just over 16%, followed by three providers, Amazon, KubeVirt, and Azure at 8%. Next slide, please. So for the Amazon provider, we now support connecting to a custom endpoint. This could be required when connecting to a government or a national region, or to connect to a service that's running in a virtual private cloud. And as you can see, the Add Provider screen has a new text field where the user can enter in that endpoint URL string. Next slide, please. We added support for a number of new regions this sprint, for France, Australia, and Germany. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to hand it over to Dan Berger, who is going to share an update on a feature that he implemented. Over to you, Dan.
Hi. Yes, we implemented sysprep template support for Azure. Really, we added support for it for any platform that wants to implement it, but for now, it's just Azure. Created a little video here. Oh, for those that don't know, sysprep is essentially the analog of Cloud Init for Windows. Go ahead and start the video. So yeah, here I created a customization template on the Pixie screen, and if you look here, you can see the image type is Windows, the type is sysprep, and for the script, I just put in a little PowerShell command. Now you could do this before. The problem was when you would go to the cloud provider and you provision a VM, you wouldn't see it. You would only see the cloud init templates. So I'm just showing you how I get there. Images, we're going to provision. Here I'm selecting a Windows image. Ignore the leading / for now. I'm going to fix that. And then you go to provision and you get to the customization tab here in a second. I did try to edit some of that waiting stuff out. And there you can see it. You have the option of selecting it there. Now these templates, since this is for Windows only, if you are provisioning a non-Windows VM, Linux VM, and you go to the provisioning screen and customize, you will not see it. And that is deliberate. And that is it. Over to Tom.
Yes, I'm going to cover the update of the Google provider. So next slide, please. In Google, we updated Fog for, you see quite a heavy version change. So it's a year of changes worth. And we have a huge rewrite of Google Fog library since version 1. So we need to adjust and completely alter the mapping for refresh parsers for cloud and network, fix the event and metrics collections because the API changed and it was all broken. And also I've introduced a new test suite for event collections and rewritten quite a lot of specs. So yeah, that's probably about it. Next slide, Adam.
Thanks, Tom. On the overt side, they fixed an issue where a targeted refresh of a VM after removing a snapshot was disconnecting a lot of other things, and so that was fixed up. There's an option added to provide the network profile name in provisioning, so you don't have to know the ID of the network profile. And in support of the V2V effort, they added support for SSH key pairs to the Rev authentication types. And they also parse NICs, which are connected to network profiles, to make network profiles more of a first-class citizen in refresh, so that's great. On the Ansible Tower side, they dropped support for Tower 2.x, which has been out of maintenance for almost a year now, so that should help us clean up some outdated code. And we also improved the spec helper, which builds tower inventory, which is used to generate cassettes for the VCRs for the specs for Ansible Tower. Next slide. On the vSphere side, we added the driver type to virtual machine NICs, so you can tell if it's, for example, E1000 or VMXNet3. You couldn't see that before, so we added that to the guest device model, which was previously only used for storage adapter types. We fixed provisioning and reconfigure with streaming refresh, which was called out last sprint review as something which hadn't been done yet, so now that works if you're using streaming refresh. And we also reduced the cache scope for streaming refresh to not store host storage devices, which can take a ridiculous amount of memory. On the vCloud side, they, as Dan said, added the ability to reconfigure NICs. And they also will now inventory vApps that are not powered on before they were skipping anything that wasn't started. So now you can see vApps which are provisioned but chose to be started. And that's it.
Thanks, Adam. We had 22 PRs merged this sprint. Several dialog issues were addressed. Eric fixed the service UI refresh issue and a find-specific refresh issue. And Drew, you fixed the classic UI service dialog performance issue. Next slide, please. Billy, Fitz, and Madhu have been hard at work finishing up the consolidated email enhancement, which has a single class for all email methods. We currently have over a dozen email classes. Some advantages are that it's a single location for all email, and it uses a new configuration email settings class. Users can simply create an instance to generate a new email in most cases, and you can disable all or selected emails. The existing email classes will be deprecated in the future. Next slide, please. The new email class resides in the system notification email. The class currently has around 60 instances. Next slide, please. The screenshot shows a configuration email showing the default values. Users will copy this class to a writable domain and set up the email defaults. Next slide, please. This screenshot shows the Cloud VM Retire email instance. All the necessary values are specified in the instance. Notice the use of the null coalescing operator in the to field. This gives users the ability to specify multiple values based on what's available. Next slide, please. Now, this screenshot shows the Cloud VM Provision Complete email. It's a little bit more complex of an email, and it requires the use of an automate method to create the email body. Notice the customized method slot, which uses the automate method to generate the email body. Next slide, please.
Okay. On platform, we had 33 PRs merged. Bunch of enhancements there this time. LJ made an enhancement to upload the automated models and dialogues with the log collection, something that's been asked for a long time. Libor went in as a bug fix, but it's really an enhancement to reference the current tag assignments when filtering resources for chargeback. So we always went with the historical tag. So based on like what the timestamp of the metrics that you're looking at, the tags that were on there, but quite often users will tag resources and then run chargeback reports, and we wouldn't look at the current tags, so you wouldn't get anything on the report. So that's a pretty big. Keenan did some work to take a lot of the places where we have admin user hard-coded in the code and actually make real product features for role assignment there, so that when you actually copy the super admin role to another user, you actually would get the same privileges that the real admin user has. And Joe V made an enhancement to extend the support of member of to a different multi-value attribute in LDAP for group membership. So we had hard-coded as member of, but you can actually change, you can set something in configuration to point it to a different attribute in your LDAP directory. And some bug fixes. Yuri made on the persistent volume for reporting persistent volumes. It was coming out as a hash, and he added a couple virtual columns for that. And I think LJ made fix for bubbling up error messages for validation when you delete a recently shut down appliance. It was silently failing in the UI. That's it for the platform. I'll turn it over to Alberto for the API.
Thanks, Greg. So on the API side, we have two enhancements that came in this sprint. The first one was supporting physical switches by Saulo. So we have a new primary collection, API physical switches, standard collection and resource gets, as well as bulk queries. And also we support the refresh action, which can be done on an individual resource as well as bulk for multiple physical switches as shown in the last example. Next slide, please. Yep, the next enhancement is by Adam. He's added the archive and on-archive actions to service templates that was needed for the V2V work. So these actions are on the API service templates entry point. We can run them on single resources or bulk, and it gives us the standard result signatures. So, and here showing the post signatures for both. That's it for the API. Next slide, please.
Hi, for documentation in this sprint, we had 17 PRs merged, 15 of which were enhancements and 2 of which addressed bugs. A couple of the highlights here are we've updated the pods documentation to remove appliance console references and added documentation for configuring custom SSL certifications, migrated content on container resources to the Managing Infrastructure guide. We've added some prerequisites for installing CloudForms on AWS. Next slide, please.
Okay, so now I'd like to open this up for Q&A. Okay, Thanks everyone for joining. We will reconvene in 2 weeks, June 20th.